Okay.
Okay, so we're going to start by looking at this map, because I want to talk a little bit about the map before we get going this evening, or as we begin. A few key places that I want you to see. Starting from the bottom, this is Edom. Okay, so when we talked about Herod the Great, particularly, we called him an Edomite, and he's not an Israelite. And so that was part of the problem with Herod's reign. The Jews never really accepted him. So this is not part of the nation Israel. Neither is Moab here or Ammon here. These are all the pagan nations around Israel, or the Aramea up here, the Arameans. Today, all of this is Jordan. And if you look on your map today, the capital of Jordan is Ammon. So they still hold on to some of the verbiage here, that the capital city is named Ammon. So here is in the south is Kadesh. This is where they had the first opportunity to enter the land after the wilderness wanderings. But sorry, my computer is still talking to me. But they obviously got cold feet, and they did not go into the land down here. 40 years of wandering relatively here, and then the children of Israel entered in Jericho here. This map tells us kind of an idealized version of the location of the inheritance of the tribes, with Judah, Simeon, Reuben, Gad, Manasseh on two sides, Ephraim, Dan, Benjamin, Issachar, Zebulun, Naphtali. Remember last week we talked about how the prediction of Jesus in the region of Zebulun and Naphtali puts him, even way back in Isaiah, puts him in what is then later going to be called Galilee. Idealized because this is Tyre and Sidon in the region of Asher, but that really was always not all the way conquered, and those cities were in Lebanon in Jesus' time. We're going to talk today about this location right here, Beth Shean, and the reason I bring that up to you is because we were in Megiddo the first night, and this is what's called the Jezreel Valley. You read that often in Scripture, and here you have the Jordan Valley. And so the location of Beth Shean becomes extremely important. We always ask the question, why is there a city here? And Beth Shean is at the confluence of these two valleys, which also were two main roads. And so it became a ancient trade center, and that's why that city is there primarily. We'll look at that in a little while. We'll also be talking about Caesarea Philippi, which is up here. It's not on this map because it was a later development in terms of city. This is the Judges period, around 1200 to 1050 BC. So Caesarea Philippi isn't there yet, but it's up in that region. We'll also today talk about Bethlehem here, and I want you to note how close Bethlehem is to Jerusalem. And of course that becomes very important to the story of the Nativity, but today, as we'll see, the security wall runs right across here, and it's almost impossible to get from Bethlehem to Jerusalem, even though the distance is, I don't know, 5 or 6 miles, so not very far at all. One of the things I wanted you to notice on this map is the fact that there are two locations for Dan. Dan, the region, and Dan, the city. And that becomes extremely important for the first place that we're going to consider this evening, and one of the places that the furthest north place that we'll visit on our trip, and that is the city of Dan. The Danites, located here, were supposed to take that piece of property that's in dark green. Like I say, this is an idealized version of the conquest map, because the tribes never really did exactly what they were supposed to do. You notice the Danites are next to Philistia. This is where the Philistines lived, and there was constant struggle between the Philistines and the Danites. You may recall the story of Samson and his struggles with the Philistines. Samson is a Danite, And there came a point when the Danites kind of abandoned their effort to settle in this land, or at least a good portion of them did. And they also turned their back on their inheritance. In so doing, we'll notice, turned their back on the Lord and settled up here, which is in the region of Naphtali, which Naphtali didn't completely, conquer that area either. So that is kind of the setting for the beginning of our discussion today. What happened here, up in Dan, and why are these people here instead of here? And the story of that is found in Judges chapter 18. Let me read you a little bit there. We're settling. We're starting in the story where the Danites reject their proper inheritance. The city that is now called Dan on this map, actually at this time in history, was not called Dan. It was called Laish. And so it says in Judges 18, in those days Israel had no king. And in those days, the tribe of the Danites was seeking a place of their own where they might settle, because they had not yet come into an inheritance among the tribes of Israel. That's code for the fact that the Philistines were defeating them. Okay? So the Danites sent 5 of their leading men from Zorah and Eshtaol to spy out the land and explore it. These men represented all the Danites. They told them, "Go and explore the land." So they entered the hill country of Ephraim and came to the house of Micah, where they spent the night. When they were near Micah's house, they recognized the voice of the young Levite, previously mentioned in the book, and they turned in there and asked him, "Who brought you here, and what are you doing in this place? Why are you here?" He told them that what Micah had done for him, and said, "He has hired me, and I am his priest." So this is the period of Judges where the religion is going south, and this Levite is kind of like a Levite for hire in the nation. And Micah, this man who's living in Ephraim, you can see how they're kind of walking northern direction. He has been hired by Micah as his personal priest. I'll read on. Then they said to him, "Please inquire of God to learn whether our journey will be successful." The priest answered them, "Go in peace, your journey has the Lord's approval." So the 5 men left and came to Laish, which is way up north where that city of Dan now is. They came to Laish, where they saw that the people were living in safety like the Sidonians, which is a picture of peace. Sidon was a peaceful place. At peace and secure, and since their land lacked nothing and they were prosperous, also they lived a long way from the Sidonians. You can see Sidon is way north on the ocean. They had no relationship with anyone else. And they returned to Zorah and Eshtaol, their fellow Danites, and they asked them, "How did you find things?" And they answered, "Come on, let's attack them. We've seen the land, and it's good. Aren't you going to do something? Don't hesitate to go there and take it over. And when you get there, you will find an unsuspecting people, a spacious land that God has put into your hands, a land that lacks nothing whatever." Okay, so that's what the Danites were doing. Instead of conquering the land that God had given them, they decided to go way north, find this place where people are living at peace, unsuspecting, and that's the people that they attacked, and they were victorious. I'm reading on. 600 men of the Danites, armed for battle, set out. On their way, they set up camp near Kiriath Jearim in Judah. This is why the place of Kiriath Jearim is called Menachat Dan to this day. And they went up to the hill country of Ephraim and came to Micah's house. And so they 600 men moved from the region of Dan moving up north to the area of Dan, which is going to be named after their city. And they meet up with this priest, okay? I'm picking up the reading in verse 19. They say to him, "Be quiet, don't say a word, come with us and be our father and priest. Isn't it better that you serve a tribe and a clan in Israel as priest rather than just one man's household?" The priest was very pleased. He took the ephod and the household gods and the idol and went along with the people. Did you catch that? The household gods and the idol. So this is a Levite who's an idolater. and he's teaching idolatry, and the Danites are adopting the idolatry. When they had gone some, verse 22, when they had gone some distance from Micah's house, the men who lived near Micah were called together and overtook the Danites. They shouted after them, and the Danites turned and said to Micah, "What's the matter with you? Why do you call out to fight?" And he replied, "You took the gods I made and my priests and went away. What else do I have? How can you ask what's the matter with you?" And the Danites answered, "Don't argue with us, or some of the men may get very angry and attack you and your family, and you will lose your lives." So the Danites went their way, and Micah, seeing that they were too strong for him, turned around and went back home. And then they took what Micah had made, the idols, and his priest, and went on to Laish against the people at peace and secure, and they attacked them with the sword and burned down their city. And there was no one to rescue them. So that gives you a flavor for the spiritual situation among the Danites as they take over the city of Laish, and they rename it Dan. That was about the year 1100 BC. Okay? Fast forward 170 years, and about 930 BC, Saul has lived and died. David has lived and died. Solomon has lived and died. And now Solomon's son, Rehoboam, is about to become the king of Israel. And now we pick up the reading in 1 Kings 12, and it says, "When all the Israelites heard that Jeroboam," this was a man in Solomon's court who had fled the country because he fell out of Solomon's good graces. "When Jeroboam had returned, they sent him and called to assembly and made him king over Israel. Only the tribe of Judah remained loyal to the house of David." Here's where the nation divides. Okay? Verse 21 of chapter 12 of 1 Kings. "When Rehoboam," this is Saul's son, "arrived in Jerusalem, he mustered the whole house of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin, 180,000 fighting men to make war against the house of Israel," that's the north, "regained the kingdom for Rehoboam, son of Solomon. But the word of God came to Shimei, the man of God, 'Say to Rehoboam, son of Solomon, king of Judah, to the whole house of Judah and Benjamin, and to the rest of the people, this is what the Lord says. Do not go up to fight against your brothers the Israelites. Go home, every one of you, for this is my doing.' So they obeyed the word of the Lord. They went home as the Lord had ordered. And Jeroboam fortified Shechem in the hill country of Ephraim and lived there. From there he went out and built up Peniel. Jeroboam thought to himself, 'The kingdom will now likely revert to the house of David if these people go up to offer sacrifices at the temple of the Lord in Jerusalem. They will again give their allegiance to the Lord, Rehoboam king of Judah, and Rehoboam king of Judah. They will kill me and return to King Rehoboam.' After seeking advice, the king made 2 golden calves. He said to the people, 'It is too much for you to go up to Jerusalem. Here are your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of Egypt. One he set up in Bethel, and the other in Dan. And this thing became a sin. The people went even as far as Dan to worship the one there. Jeroboam built shrines on high places and appointed priests from all sorts of people, even though they were not Levites. He instituted a festival on the 15th day of the 8th month, like the festival held in Judah, and he offered sacrifices on the altar. This he did in Bethel, sacrificing to the calves he had made, and at Bethel he installed priests in high places. On the 15th day of the 8th month, a month of his choosing, he offered sacrifice on the altar he had built. So he instituted a festival for the Israelites and went up to the altar to make offering." So when the nation divided, Jeroboam the first king of the northern kingdom, set up his home here, and they're saying is that the division was right along this line, right above Benjamin. And so to the southernmost portion of the land, new country of Israel at Bethel, and the northernmost portion, he set up what we now refer to as the high places, the places where they were worshiping idols. And these idols were golden calves, and the calf idol was placed in such a situation where underneath the positioning of the calf idol was an empty place to signify Yahweh. And so there became this mishmash of religion where the people, instead of going to Jerusalem, which would have, he thought, weakened his hold over them, the people went in the south, they went to Bethel, in the north they went to Dan, and they worshipped these idol gods at the high places. And so this is the first king of a string of kings. All the kings of the north are idol worshippers. None of them worship Yahweh, and that's about 930 BC, 722 BC. This entire region falls to the Assyrians, and only Benjamin and Judah are spared. And I read to that whole story to show you how susceptible the Danites were already to idolatry and to a watered-down religion. It kind of was already present in their religious DNA, if you will, to be willing to do this. And most of this happened as a result of the heavy taxation and indeed forced labor that Solomon inflicted on the north to get all the building projects built that he was building in the south. So there was resentment, and when Rehoboam came into power, he couldn't hold on to that power, and the nation split. And so today, from an archaeological point of view, Dan represents a great place to visit and see what the Bible is talking about in these passages. We are able to go to the raised platform where the idol was placed, called the high place. We're able to see the location of the altar that Jeroboam installed there, and the people came for worship. We're also able to remember that this was a previous city. They didn't invent this city. That Laish was there previously, so there's even previous construction to the 930 BC time, and we see in Dan we see a wonderful gate complex, probably the best gate complex that we get to walk through today is in Tel Dan. And you remember when we were looking at Megiddo, we had some pictures of the gates and how the gates were a multi-room complex. The whole idea of the gate was the farm people could come into the first portion of this gate complex, do their business, they would exchange their wares and so forth. Also, there would be a judge there who would make legal decisions. There would be a garrison of soldiers there. All that would be able to take place in the gate complex so that the people, the common people, never got up into the citadel. What we visit in most of these archaeological sites is the citadel, because the citadel was that which was made of stone. And it remains today, the huts and so forth out there. Even in Galilee, a lot of the very early huts were wood and mud brick. In fact, this gate complex, some of it is mud brick. So in any event, that's kind of the interesting thing about the history of Dan. So I want to take you, let me see, I think I have some, no,